In the dungeon section, there are 5 different potion keeps, 4 of which correspond to the 4 different affinities that champions can be, and an extra one being the arcane keep. Each of these potion keeps drops a varying amount and quality potions of their specified type throughout the difficulty stages. These potions are what are used to ascend your champions, which we have discussed previously. It is important to note that when you first start your account, you are given access to all of these potion keeps at once for a set amount of time. Once that time ends, you will then only have access to a certain keep on rotating days, with the exception of Arcane Keep being the only one that is constantly open. Spirit Keep is open Monday and Thursday. Force Keep, Tuesday and Friday. Magic Keep, Wednesday and Saturday. And finally, Void Keep is only open on a Sunday. It is possible to spend gems to open a specific keep for 24 hours for 200 gems. This is extremely advised against and is also stupidly expensive gems wise. It is far easier to just wait until the correct day it is open and just farm it that day if you are early or mid game and struggling for potions. Generally, once you get further into the lifetime of your account and start tackling higher levels of Demon Lord, you will naturally stack up an excessive amount of potions over time, as the amount of champions you need to ascend slows down compared to the rate you gain them. All potion keeps will start like most dungeons, with 2 waves of varying normal champions, the final wave being the boss wave. Each of the keeps has a different boss with minions, which work upon different mechanics. We shall start with the Arcane Keep. In the Arcane Keep, the boss minions will do the following. The left minion will attempt to place decrease attack on your team. The right minion will attempt to remove all buffs from your team. Early progression will see you wanting to try and deal with both of these minions quickly, especially the right one, as a removal of buffs from your team integrates with the boss's mechanics. The boss itself is subject to most of the usual passive effects of not being able to be controlled. He can, however, have his turn meter controlled. The boss has one main ability, being that he will place increased speed and defense on himself with a 4-turn cooldown. His normal attack will hit all of your team and do 50% less damage to your team members that have active buffs on stages up to 6. Stage 7 and above will decrease by 75%, however base damage is doubled. This is what makes dealing with the right hand minion important to reduce the incoming damage from the boss. Ideally, you will want to bring champions that can provide buffs for your team. A champion which can help speed you up and if possible slow the enemy down. A champion that can decrease the enemy defense and attack. Finally, high damage to deal with the minions as soon as possible. A good early team would be dependent on which start promo codes you may have used or champions pulled. However, a basic example would be something such as High Katoon lead to speed you up and slow down the enemy. Deacon Armstrong, if you use that promo code, does turn meter manipulation for your team and the enemy, whilst also placing an AoE decreased defense and can also land leech with his normal attack. War Priest, from the initial start campaign, can heal and provide an increased attack buff. Your starter champion of choice for damage, a champion such as Coffin Smasher or Petrifia, are both rare quality champions which can help with placing a decreased attack debuff on enemies. Moving on to the Spirit Keep boss mechanics. The minions for the boss will do the following. The left minion will attempt to place a stun debuff on your team, whilst the right minion will attempt to place a decreased accuracy debuff on your team. Both of these are potentially annoying, but not a deal breaker to progress this fight. The boss itself is the main issue. The boss is subject to the same passives as the Arcane Keep boss, just with one extra passive effect. This being that at the start of each turn, the boss will heal by 20% of its max HP on stages 1 to 6, then increasing to 50% from stage 7 onwards. This can be dealt with by either brute forcing your way through if your team has the damage, or by placing a heal reduction debuff on the boss. The boss's main active skill will remove all debuffs from itself and then place a block debuffs buff on itself for 2 turns, on a 6-turn cooldown. You can either use a buff strip champion to clear this to then allow you to place debuffs again. Or try to wait it out and then use the 4 turns of potential debuffs as your window of opportunity. The boss's normal attack will hit your whole team and damage will increase according to her current HP, meaning the higher her current HP, the more damage it will deal to you. Your best bet with this fight is to try to bring in champions that give access to heal reduction debuff, and if possible a champion that can remove buffs from enemies, which you are seeing Sun Wukong in this team do. Rocktooth is a rare champion that can be farmed from Felwin's Gate stages of the campaign, and has an ability on a 3-turn cooldown when skilled up, which will place either a 50% or 100% heal reduction, depending on his ascendancy level. It will be important to not bother placing this straight away due to the boss clearing debuffs on its first turn and placing block debuffs. There aren't any campaign farmable champions which provide a buff removal skill, however there are a few rares which can do this, so be on the lookout for them if you open any shards. An early team for this would be similar to the Arcane Keep, just substituting in a heal reduction champion like Rocktooth, and if possible, a remove buff champion. The best situation would be to have your team start by focusing on clearing the minions. It would also be helpful to have one champion place any debuff on the boss to force it to use its ability to clear debuffs, preferably a champion that has access to a debuff on its standard auto attack ability so you do not lose a debuff cooldown. Once the boss has then used the ability, you then have your buff clearing champion remove the block debuff from the boss, and the champion plays decrease healing. You would then be free to purely damage the boss and hopefully kill it before it has its ability back again. If you do not manage this, then you simply repeat the process. Now for the Force Keep. The minions for the boss will do the following. Left minion will attempt to place a heal reduction debuff on your team. The right one will place an increased defense buff on the boss. These will both be important to deal with. The boss itself again has the same passives as Arcane, and an extra being that from stages 1 to 6 he has an increased base defense number set to 1500. However, as the stages get higher, this also increases. The boss has one main ability, which hits all of your team and has a chance to place a stun debuff, which cannot be resisted. This can, however, be blocked via block debuffs or cleansed off by another champion. His main normal attack will also hit all of your team and have a chance to place decrease attack on your team. This again cannot be resisted but can be blocked or cleansed. Your best strategy for this fight is to bring a champion on your team which can place a block debuffs or cleanse them. All rare champions in the game with access to block debuffs can only place it for 1 turn, so it is difficult to time well. However, Spirit Host will be your easiest early option for this, as she can cleanse and then place block debuffs. This gives you access to 2 potential ways of dealing with the debuffs placed by the boss, and she can be farmed in the Durham Forest stages of the campaign. Also try to bring a decreased defense champion to reduce the higher base defense that the boss gains by default. Now for the Magic Keep. The minions on this fight will do the following. The left minion will attempt to place decreased defense on your team. The right will cleanse debuffs from the boss and then place a block debuffs buff on the boss. The right minion will be your priority to kill, left being purely to help your survivability. The boss itself has 2 specific passives on top of the usuals we've seen so far. The first one is active as soon as you get to the boss wave and grants the boss a shield for 3 turns proportional to the boss's max HP. When you take down this shield by whatever means, or the 3 turns end, that passive is never used again. The second passive ability increases the damage of her attacks by 25% for each buff she has active. Her main ability is on a 3-turn cooldown and places a shield, increased speed, increased attack, and increased defense buffs on herself. This then works alongside her passive to increase her damage by 100% without even factoring in the damage increase from the increased attack buff itself. Her standard attack will hit all of your team and has a 20% chance to reduce your turn meter by 50%. The main things to do in this fight is ensure you kill the right minion as soon as you can. It's also ideal to get rid of the left minion too, so you aren't taking a decreased defense debuff. However, if you have a cleanse or block debuffs champion, then this becomes less important. Next, you want to try and make sure you can either place block buffs on the champion after the right minion is dead, or have a champion that can remove buffs from an enemy. Muckstalker will be the only champion that can be farmed from campaign locations. His A2 ability will be useless on the boss, so if you can use an AI team setup to turn that ability off and just have him spam his A1, which is a 50% chance to place block buffs, and pray it lands. There are quite a few other rare champions that also have this skill, but will be dependent on your shard pull luck, the same as with a remove buff ability like we spoke about for the Spirit Keep. The final potion keep is the Void Keep. The minions on this fight will do the following. The left minion will attempt to place a weaken debuff on your team. The right one will attempt to clear any buffs from your team and then place a block buffs debuff on your team. In this fight, killing the right minion will again be your priority, then killing the left purely to help survivability. The boss itself is very simple to understand, as he doesn't have any special passive abilities like the Spirit, Force and Magic ones do, so he only has the standard passives like the Arcane Keep boss. For this fight, it will be easier to understand by talking about his standard normal attack first. On stages 1 to 6, he will hit all of your team and place a poison debuff that cannot be resisted for 3 turns. Stage 7 onwards, he will place 2 of these poisons. These poisons can be blocked via block debuffs or cleansed off. His main ability will now cause him to deal damage to each champion based on how many turns of poison debuffs they have on them. So if one champion has 2 poisons with 3 turns remaining, he will deal 6 instances of poison damage to that champion. Since the poison debuffs he places are the 5% HP version, this means each instance of damage will deal 5% of your champion's max HP in damage. So your champion in that situation would take a 30% HP damage hit. It is easy to see, if you do not manage these poisons, how it can easily spiral out of control. If the boss was able to place many of the poison debuffs and still dealing the actual damage of his attacks, he can start to wear your team down, and then hit you with a big damage attack by activating all of the poison turns and potentially wipe you out. The best way to deal with this would be again to first kill the right minion as soon as possible, the left one being a secondary priority. You would also do well to have champions that can apply decrease attack and defense to help make the fight quicker, reducing the chances he will get to keep placing the poisons. Finally, Spirit Host will again be a very good early addition to your team, since she can both cleanse the poisons and place block debuffs for a turn. This has covered all 5 potion keeps. I hope you have found this helpful.